for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Covert.
Here.
Crowner.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lees.
Here.
Young. Here.
So move. Support.
Motion and support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Same sign.
Mayor, you turn that.
Yes. There we go. Entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Motion to approve is presented.
Support.
Motion and support. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, Greg.
Evening. Met with USDA today, looking at some other funding options, both loan and grant opportunities through USDA. Going to do a little bit more investigating on that. We met with Beaverdale yesterday afternoon, well, the 3 subdivisions yesterday afternoon to discuss water. It's pretty much the same conversation we've had for the past 2 years. We had provided a copy of a draft agreement with the increase in the rate. Richard Snyder wasn't able to attend, but he had been making some progress working on SRF and working with Klingo and Associates. Rural Water, Rathburn attended as well. They're interested, well, I say they're, I'm not going to say they're interested. They're looking at whether they can come in and provide a service to, that being new lines, maintenance, et cetera. They'd still purchase their water from the city of West Burlington. Seems like a good option to me as well. The question, but the issue is that we really need them to make a decision on how they're going to proceed. So I imagine we'll be meeting in the near future after they've had an opportunity to get together and continue that discussion. We may have to do some type of extension that expires June 30th of this year, but I would imagine it would be a limited extension with some timelines regarding water infrastructure, and it would also include the 150% fee adjustment. Alice Place, permit is in, preliminary plans are in, not full plans. Mark's been reviewing those. Jesse took a look at those as well. Mike has done his work on that. So that's moving forward. Looking forward to having that on its way. The trail construction has been interesting. Can't get off the bridge. Mike's got a little bit more information on that for you. I'll leave that to him. We're not sure, but we may be looking for a pool manager, so we'll see. We haven't heard back. We're not getting some feedback from her, so I'll let you know. But we don't really have any candidates. So if people have any ideas, we would love to talk to somebody. That's all I have.
Thank you. Well, with that kind of introduction, Mike, do you?
I'm not sure I got a lot more information about it other than some traffic loops are cut. Others have to be cut to do the trail project. Manholes were put on plans. Wires weren't. So we're in the middle of some's been destroyed. Some's got to be replaced. The cost, it's probably going to be cheaper to go with a camera to redo it versus restring everything. I don't know where we're at or who's doing what. We had a discussion with the engineer today. We're waiting to hear back from them on that. The other project, the Casey's, we're going to have to be out there tomorrow hydrovacing that dangerous 24-inch force main to locate it for them before that project starts, because where their tanks are being installed and with their benching, they're going to be close to that. So we got to get them a definite where that is. So we'll be working on that. And with all the rain and the flooding, it was down by SEC. We have a storm sewer that the intake got buried. I got a hold of the plant. They came out. They were out in November and February to finish up some riprap so their motors can get through. And in the works of that, the end of our pipe got buried. So they were real good about it. Showed them what the problem was. They'll be out there to open up that, so hopefully we won't back water up, clear back up to SEC on the next rainstorm. Spring jetting's done. We got that done this week, all the problem sewers that we jet twice a year. So that was successful and no issues were found in them. That's about all I got.
Thank you.
Mike, did you say that was an engineering problem on the bridge?
We're distinguishing that problem at this point.
What happened there? I mean, how did it get missed?
I don't know if missed is the right word.
Yeah.
They were marked in the typical fashion for marking them. The question is whether it's they were marked sufficiently, which I think they were. Nobody ever marks the loops. You mark where the loops.
All the
where line
conduits
comes out in the
from
conduit.
manholes to back of curb are marked, and from back of curb into the street is those diamond-shaped things you see that you pull up on, which the wires are 1.5 inches in. So all those are on top, and then the areas of curb and gutter they had to cut and remove is where those loops are, and I don't know how that didn't get added to the plans or where we're at with that. We're still working that out.
Still having conversations. We don't want, and if the loops are damaged and cut, which we know a few of them are, and depending on how we get that settled, we're not going to recommend putting in loops again, which is an older or outdated system. We would come back for about the same cost, slightly more, and you'd put in the camera system. But
Then it's never an issue. The next overlay or anything else or curb remover, you go by camera and it gets everything off the street. That's why we got that in that budget for the truck stop too, to go back to cameras instead of loops. They're always broke, or you need to grind for an overlay and then your cost and you to put the loops back in.
So was it something the contractor didn't account for? Was it something that should have been on the plan?
I mean, I brought that to attention a year ago about those loops 6 months ago being out in the runway, and
Well, it's in the area they're tearing out.
and
Is where the issue
so that should have
is.
been brought up.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Where?
everybody knows they're there.
They're there and they're marked. That's where we're at. We're working on that.
So how much are the cameras-ish?
38,
36 or 38?
36, 38.
Two
and
to replace
amount of-
14 loop?
Yeah, about 32 by the time they restring wire, and that's if they don't tear any more conduit out on the way through too.
Is that on the DOT's portion or our portion?
On the bridge,
So that's,
It's just off the bridge at the off-ramp,
yeah.
which is, there are traffic lights.
So it's our cost.
Part of the project, right. The question is whether it was included in the contract, whether it should have been accounted for in the bid price, whether it wasn't accounted for in the bid price, if it should, so I imagine DOT will get involved as well. They're also coming out to inspect the bridge. They did find
Yeah, there's a
gap that,
void under the
Void that
deck.
they had to
Once they
fix.
pulled the sidewalk, the old part of the trail out, there is a void. Then contacted DOT's, been in emails. They were aware of the other issue on the face of and there was a order out to do that, and they weren't here to do that yet before our project, and now they found the void under it, so DOT's on their way down to see what's going on before they can move forward across there too. So it's like any other project. It all looks good on paper.
On that happy note, Jesse, you want?
Sure. We still got the fundraising going on for the K-9, the raffle tickets for the handgun. I was contacted last week or maybe 2 weeks ago. We have an ISO audit at the fire department here in April. They've been doing area departments, so I figured they'd be coming, and they're going to do us on April 9th along with Mediapolis. They just come in, and we got a whole list of things that we got to get ready for them, so we've been working on that. Myself and the mayor went to a meeting last week talking. I brought up during the county meeting for the Firefighters Association about burn bans and how we have to go to get them enacted through the state of Iowa. And how it works now is all 5 chiefs in Des Moines County would have to let Shannon down at Emergency Management know that we would like a burn ban, and then she would contact the state fire marshal. They would put that in. We're looking at doing what some other counties are doing, is when anytime there's a red flag warning issued by the National Weather Service, is that there'll automatically be a burn ban that goes in effect in Des Moines County, and it'll only be in effect when the red flag warning. So you're typically talking about 24 hours or less that the red flag warnings are in effect. So we're working on that, and I think we got everything figured out. It just has to go through emergency management when we declare burn bans. There has been 8 red flag warnings in the last 5 years, and probably 4 of those have been in the last 6 months just because of how dry it has been. But 3 inches of rain kind of helps that out a little bit also. So, and that also, with that 3-inch rain we had there a little over a week ago, we sprung another leak at the fire department, so we're looking into that too. So on that roof above the meeting room, same place we had issues this winter. So that's all I have.
Hey, Jesse, did that old generator kick in when we had that power outage last Saturday? How'd that get handled?
Somebody had to be at the fire station and turn it on, and then they opened the doors and then shut it off. So the bids were out. We got 3 bids back. That was approved last week, so I'm working with Bazines, and hopefully that project will get started here real soon. So.
Anything from building?
I've got an update for tomorrow, but Alice Place was probably the biggest piece, and started doing that review. Well, everybody started doing that review, so.
And he's sent out all the notices to Brushtown.
Oh, yeah. Everybody received their notices on Brushtown. I heard from 3, I believe, out of the 16 that he sent out with questions. And they'll be working on it, so I thought that was a pretty good result. We'll see if we get more comments or questions. Got access to the file. Mark's on vacation, is it tomorrow?
Yes.
For a few days. But we have access to the system, so if we have questions, we can get into the permits or to the file on nuisances, so.
Speaking of that, will you give Mark my kudos for the detailed information that he's been providing us for the building permits and the nuisances notices? It's kind of nice to know that he's marked out the neighborhoods, and you know, it's something we haven't had in the past, and I just want to thank him for that knowledge.
I will do that. Thank you.
Kelly, anything from you?
Not tonight.
Okay. Angie? No. With that, then, I'll go to council. Melanie, we'll start with you.
Just one thing, noticed last week, the Greater Burlington, West Burlington Chamber Convention Bureau posted the RAGBRAI logo, and it's Dip It Good is the logo and the phrase for when RAGBRAI comes to our area. And that's what I know. It looks like a cool logo. They still haven't announced the route into town, so I'm not sure how much West Burlington will be affected or not, but it should be a good time, and it'll be a chance to showcase our community when everybody shows up. So, kind of fun to say it, right? Dip it good. Okay. Okay, I think it's fun to say. Question, do we know why the power went out last Saturday night? I never heard.
I was in contact with Alliant that night. They're not sure. They had some systems shut down, and it wasn't just them. It happened to REC and them, and they have no answer why it did and kicked out what it did. They could not, it wasn't from a tree limb or anything else, some kind of a grid issue that they had no answer for. But they did let me know that it was not specifically just Alliant, that they said REC had the same issues in areas too, so.
A big swath of communities.
Middletown.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, it was dark coming into town. So thank you guys for putting out those stop signs in the corners and stuff. The person who was driving really appreciated that as we got to town. Thanks.
I'm good.
You good? Okay.
Me too.
All right. Andy?
Tomorrow is Business of the Year Day, so 10:45, we'll meet here at City Hall, and we will go to the winner, who is still a surprise. So 11 a.m. tomorrow, that'll be announced. Brad's got it ready to go on Facebook and everything there. So hopefully see you in the morning. We've started things for 4th of July already. Bands are booked, prizes are ordered, tickets will be here soon. If you know anybody that wants to sell raffle tickets for a group this year, please send them my direction. We'll have those tickets fairly soon. More of that coming, but let's get through tomorrow. So that's it. Thank you.
I'm good. Okay, thank you. And I don't have any particular comments, because I can go right into any citizen inquiries. Seeing none, I will go ahead and issue a proclamation here, if you'll bear with me. Whereas the City of West Burlington will observe Junior Achievement Day on the first Thursday in April as an opportunity to recognize and celebrate junior achievement of the Heartland for empowering our young people to own their economic success. Whereas junior achievement of the Heartland's educational contribution equips our young people to become the next generation of productive employees and self-sufficient citizens to ensure the economic prosperity of West Burlington. Whereas it is fitting for parents, educators, and businesses and other members of the community to join in the junior achievement effort to ensure the future success and economic health of our young people and the communities in which they live. I, therefore, as Mayor of West Burlington, do hereby proclaim official recognition of April 4th, 2024, and every first Thursday of April thereafter as Junior Achievement Day in the City of West Burlington. Signed by me. Move on at this point to our only item of new business.
Shall I begin? Yes. A couple questions on the 4 or 5, I guess, main topics of discussion for the budget. We're putting together the budget documents and the PowerPoint presentations, and just wanted to bring this forward as our understanding of what we are taking forward. Updated some of these documents that you have in your packet. The levy comparison it now has 1010 versus the 1025 on it. So you've got on here, you've got the current year levy, you've got what the levy or what the taxes would be at $10 for next fiscal year and what 1010 levy would be. So you can see I'm just going to use $100,546 this year, $463 if nothing changed, $468 if you went up 10 cents, so they'd be paying less. If their value went up, you could, and if it went up 25,000, you can use the next line item to compare what they might be paying. In some cases it's less, sometimes cases it's slightly more. It just depends on if their value went up and how much. But I did 25,000 increments just to kind of give you an idea of where that would fall. The second set of numbers is for commercial, and really makes a difference when you get to 175,000, because that's when they're no longer paying the residential rate. That's where the 90% residential rate kicks in after $150,000 worth of value. So that's why you see the increases there across the board, and that happens regardless of the levy rate. So I wanted to give you a better comparison on, or an updated comparison on that, just for your information. So you had it in front of you. You have on the other sheet as well, you have what that tax rate generates, that 10 cents generates. You have a slightly different look on the franchise fee. You've got what it generates is in line 1. Minus 1%, and then you have a net revenue increase was a question that or discussion item that came up at the last meeting. So you can see what 2, 3, 4, and 5% generates, and what the net increase in revenue would be. That net increase subtracts out the first 1%, which is what local option sales tax generates, and what you would not collect as part of the franchise fee. And then the levy rate versus the franchise fee gives you an idea of what it would take to generate that same dollar amount if you were to use the levy rather than the franchise fee. So tried to make that a little bit clearer, make sure you had that information in front of you. At present, the consensus was to use the items in the highlighted items of 10 cents and 3-cent franchise fee for the budget, and that's what we've included so far. The other item, before I get to the resolution itself, at our last meeting, the fund balance for the general fund was around 29% and change. By taking that $200,000 and dedicating that one-time expense for the water main project that we have budgeted, that brings the general fund balance down to 22.62%. And that those funds would then be transferred to a capital project line item for that water main and transferred into that account. That brings it down again to 22.62% that you have in front of you versus closer to 30%. The other two items you have in your packet are the sample resolution that Alliant provided, and then a draft resolution of what that revenue purpose statement could look like. There's basically, if you look at Section B under the revenue purpose statement, those are really the two line items of importance or for discussion purposes, if you'd like to see those modified. I tried to.
Section B in the draft revenue purpose statement.
Yes.
In the first one?
It's draft two. Draft two. Or
It's basically, I tried to
statement.
limit it per our discussion. Item number one is the construction, reconstruction, and repair of public sanitary sewers and water mains. In option two, I went a little bit further and said the construction, reconstruction, repair of public sanitary sewers and water mains, and specifically the West Lift Station Force Main construction project I called out as part of that revenue purpose statement. Tried to make it as limited as possible and clear that it's going to be used only on sanitary sewer and water main projects, which was the discussion that we had at the last meeting. I took out the other items. Generally, cities adopt a rather, oftentimes adopt basically all of the line items in here that you can utilize it for, so you have maximum flexibility, but that was not our discussion. I did leave in item A, which is, we don't really, or essentially do, which is the inspection, supervision, and otherwise regulating of the franchise, and that needs to stay in there essentially because, I mean, that's the intended purpose of a franchise fee at its heart, but we don't inspect those lines. So I tried to narrow it.
Explain that part of to me a little bit more.
Item A?
Yeah.
Does
that mean?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
The franchise fee, you know, in part, or is really intended to regulate the franchise or help localities or municipalities regulate the franchise fee. And that gives you one of the reasons or one of the purposes it can be used for is inspecting, supervising, and regulating that franchise and the costs associated with that. We don't have any costs associated with that. We don't inspect their alliance lines. But that needs to be in there just from a legal perspective. That's what the original intended use for, and you can expand thereupon with that entire list, or you can limit it, which is what our discussion was, is limiting it to public sanitary sewers and water mains projects. And so I tried to make it very clear that that's the only things that it could be used for, those two projects or types of projects. And with that, I'm happy to answer questions, but this is what I'm basing, Angie and I are putting the documents in the PowerPoint presentation together. This is what we are basing that information on. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer that. If there's a consensus to go a different direction, we need to know that as well. And of course, you can, at the public hearing on April 24th, reduce the proposed levy rate back down to $10. You can't go up, but you can go down. So as of now, we are including that in the budget documents, but of course that can be taken back down and kept level should the council desire to do so. at the April 24th meeting. But
Well, I went through your franchise fees. You sent us cities that have the franchise fee. And I
Yes.
noticed that some of them have a different rate for residential and non-residential. And I wondered if that's because when I looked at my mini storage statement, I pay the state sales tax of 6% besides the local option. But on my home bill, I only pay the local option. I don't pay the state tax. And I wondered if these cities do that for that reason.
I can talk to my point of contact at Alliant.
Because then I wonder how that would affect Walmart, Target, some of our other bigger commercial stores, if that's gonna make a big difference. And the other thing, that I brought up to you is that if we do initiate the franchise fee, I'm wholeheartedly in favor of getting rid of that capital improvement project fee of $1 on our water bill.
And on the memo, I did include that amount. So I do want to point out that that generates $21,424 in last fiscal year. So if you do remove that capital project fee from the water bills, it essentially cancels out the 10-cent increase that you want to dedicate towards the 10-cent increase in the levy rate, which is $18,944. So just be aware that if we were to remove that, it's essentially one cancels the other out.
It just seems like we keep finding new ways to tax more, because we're gonna have a 2% increase in our sewer rate this year, but not the water rate, correct?
Yes.
But then next year, we'll increase this water rate and not the sewer rate. And how
That
do
was the
we know that-
recommendation, yes.
Yeah, and how do we know that Burlington won't decide to come back and say, oh, we gotta do this and this, and we're gonna have to increase your water rate
May very well.
%. So then we'll have to include that, so that that's something down the road that we have to look at.
Right. I just wanted you to be aware, though, that if you do take that dollar capital fee out of there, you're essentially,
Wiping
one
out the
cancels out the
10%,
other.
yeah.
So just so you're aware. Is the language in the revenue purpose statement along the lines of what you were thinking? I want to make sure that it is. The construction, reconstruction, and repair of public sanitary sewers and water mains. It's my understanding those were the two main purposes. The force main project obviously being one of the primary projects that we have identified at present. We have water main projects, one that's budgeted for, another one that's been identified as well. This would not include stormwater. I have sanitary defined on here. And that force main project is $6.5 million. Is at the low end of the cost, which is the one we were recommending that we move forward with, and one that we've applied for funding for. So
If a future council would, or how hard is it to change the scope of the revenue purpose statement? Let's say 5 years go by and we've got a franchise fee in place, and now we want to use the money for something else.
council can change it by resolution.
By resolution, they would go in and
One
change.
council cannot
Limit a future
limit
one,
a future
okay.
council, just like legislature cannot limit a future legislator. Unless the only way you could really do that is if you had a contract for a project, or a bond issuance that you needed to repay. I guess you can always break a contract or pay for a bond in a different fashion, but you really can't limit what a future council can do. With 90 days' notice, you can change the rate. That would be included. So our current language and our current franchise that we have omits the franchise fee, which is why I originally recommended that we at least get that language in there, and that we also include the 90-day notice period so that it would be implemented within 90 days. So that franchise fee can be adjusted throughout the year rather than one time a year when you do tax rates. And should something come up. So we currently have a franchise fee, just to be clear, and everybody knows that. We just don't have a franchise fee in that ordinance. And so that's what would be updated. Does that language comport with what your understanding was at our last discussion?
That's the language I was hoping for, not what the utility company suggested, but what you wrote, the Part B.
You're looking at the draft two?
Or draft two, yeah.
Draft two, Johnny, okay.
Yeah, the
So
draft
what I'm hearing you say is that the scope that's defined in this that resolution is what meets with what you're wanting it to be,
Yeah.
so we don't just get the money and then can spend it on anything.
Well, yeah.
Which is fine, okay.
Yeah,
cool.
if we're gonna put a franchise fee out there on this, I don't wanna put a franchise fee on just use it for the general fund or like the other ones suggested we could do. I want it for a specific case because it's been neglected, and it's coming up, and it's a huge price tag, okay? And at 3%, we're still not gonna even generate enough money to do what we need to do in the time fashion, but it helps. If we're gonna use it for, I kind of look at it like an emergency thing. You know, if the sewer line breaks that is going out there like it has in the past, there's going to be a lot of unhappy people. There's going to be a lot of unhappy people. And we know there's a problem. We just don't know the extent of that problem, but we know that there's a problem that's going to cost a lot of money that we don't have. I'm not for sure, and I've thought about this and thought about this and thought about this, how we can do it any other way. So if there's some other ideas out there, I hope they come forward with it and let me know. But that's the language I was looking for.
USDA loans would have some type of a connection to our utility rates, just like SRF loans would as well. You have to be able to make sure that you can pay the loan, not the grant portion back, but the loan back. And they tie that to rates. The question they couldn't answer was if we could transfer funds into the sewer fund to help meet those thresholds, then that's a question I'll have to talk to the bond council about. But they do have a grant component with theirs. And so ideally, we would get that. There's several, it's a much more complicated process, but lengthy process, but there's several steps that I can begin to take. There's a study that takes a slightly more in-depth study that Shive would need to help us, or would need to complete for us. Not a final design, but it has a few additional steps and additional information they require as part of the application process. So I'm digging into it right now to see if it looks appropriate to apply for. But we had a good discussion. It was good information.
And then it's my understanding that if we have money that's set aside, we are more apt to get a grant with matching part payment than we are if we don't have any set aside. We have to borrow it more, or is that
I haven't found any grants other than the potential with USDA does have a potential grant component as part of their funding. It's a loan up to 40 years, and there is a grant component as part of that USDA funding. That's the only grant per se that I've found. Now, let's say we do go out to DC and we put in a community project funding request and they funded $6.5 million. Well, okay, great.
Stop
We're
the
off and
franchise
running.
fee. Yeah.
You know, they have the ability to drop that down, or we may not get any funding at all. Obviously, there would be a matching component. There's this preliminary or additional study that we need to do. There's the final design that needs to be paid for as well, before, obviously, you can take that project out to bid. So, you know, those first couple years of the franchise fee would help you pay for final design out of, basically with cash on hand, rather than having to borrow or come up with some other funding source for it.
Another part of this that bothers me is future council can change this, okay? And right now, we got 3 people at least that's on here for 4 more years, and 2 that's here for at least 2 more years. Can't say what the next one's gonna do, but we can say what the next 2 years are gonna do. And if there's anybody on this council that wants to change this in a year from now, I would hope that they speak up now, because that would change my vote. If it's not going to be for this particular item, if there's a majority that says, hey, we're gonna put this in and then we're gonna change this in a year or 2, speak up now. I can't say what the next council will do, but if this one is, so please.
No, I'm of the opinion we need to do something. We've not done anything to set money aside for about 40 years, and might as well start today. So we need to, it's just agreeing on at what level. And I think we've got good options in front of us. And if magically somehow there's funding becomes available to cover the whole thing and we have money set aside, well, then we'll figure out what to spend on them. But I have a strong feeling that whatever money we earmark going forward for this project will get spent on that project.
Well, don't forget, we've also identified, we have 2 identified water main projects, one that we've budgeted for, one that we haven't budgeted for. There's more than just those 2. And then our sanitary sewer, Mike and I were talking this week, is largely clay, which could be where a large portion of your I&I is coming in addition to homes with illegal connections. So that is certainly another project that you could tack on to your list as well. But 24-inch force main being the priority project, given it's a main artery, it's the main artery running north and south, north-south through town, carrying all of that sewage.
And that, since you brought up stormwater, Greg, I wanted clarification on something that was in your notes. I believe you said during the recent storm, normally we run 300,000 gallons into our waste treatment plant, and over 5 million ran in during that storm event.
A little over 5.5 million gallons.
Over
That's
5.5 million gallons.
That's what I've been talking about all these years about the infiltration problem we got.
Then that to me is a near-term example of a problem.
We're paying to process rainwater.
You don't want to process clean water. It's not necessarily.
And I just wanted to get that in my
plant.
head and say that out loud. That's a big problem that we're not even, we're not working on or fixing in any meaningful
We have
fashion.
been. That's what's the injection of the foam on the last 2 years on manholes and resealed lids on all of our major structure we can, but these 40, 50-year-old clay tiles in the ground and laterals to all the houses,
All the sump pumps.
the
dropping
sump pumps that
into
are
the
pumping
sewers.
in that not
Illegal
supposed to,
connections.
illegal hookups.
Right.
But this would not cover that.
Not at all.
This franchise fee won't cover that part.
It covers,
Because
it covers sanitary sewers and water main
We're
projects.
talking force mains is what we're talking.
Yeah.
That's the primary purpose, but it covers sanitary sewers and water mains. But I'm just talking in the future, if the example was the force main gets funded, what would you use those existing funds for? Well, you could use them for the water main projects that we have outlined already, we know we have an I&I problem, and a large portion of that could be coming from our clay tiles.
And we have,
that are a
we
number of
have
years
just
old.
recently upgraded the south lift station and took care of those problems, and before that was the west with all the new pumps and VFDs. And right now, we're missing a pump out of the east, which is a 30 or 40-year-old lift station that brings everything east. It's on the list that it's gonna have to be updated too here, coming up.
But that's the kind of money that we should be able to use in the water funds and the
That would be sewer funds.
sewer funds. This other projects, we don't have that money. You know, we are saving for that kind of projects. We should be.
I don't know the numbers
Keep
for,
money in.
Citizens complain about water in their basement.
I'm sorry?
Did we have any people complain about backup in their basements with this amount of rain?
I did not.
I've had one lady that I contacted today that I'm meeting with her and drain doctor on Van Wees. She believes it's our problem. She was gonna put a septic system in her backyard. She's tired of it. She's only been here since last year. I told her she can't put a septic tank in her backyard. So I explained to her on the phone that everyone west of her, you, Melanie, Greg, all the way to Melville, the West Burlington High School, Leffler, Ramsey, drains past her house going out, and she was the only one with an issue. I tried to explain to her that it's not our main, but she is very upset and has calmed down. I'm going to meet with the drain doctor and them on site as soon as I can get this to happen, and be there when they run the camera down and see why they're saying it's our problem.
And
It can't,
as
it
a recent
can't be
example,
because it would be everyone else. But
Right.
I understand the frustration when that stuff's coming up in your basement and everybody's upset. So, I mean, I understand where she's coming from, and that's why I'm trying to work with her the best I can. And I'm gonna meet her on site, and we'll try and explain to her and see what her problem is. I'm doing my best to work with her. That is the only complaint I've had come in.
That it, and we didn't get anything from City Hall.
I did not have anybody, Katie didn't mention anybody.
At the
and I
time,
covered
I
the
mean-
there's a
front
house on
yard for
Van
a
Wees,
couple
but
days.
it appears to have come up through their foundation, not through a sewer, not through a basement drain, and they don't have a sump pump. So that's a wholly,
That
that's a
started
separate
around-
issue.
That started around 1 AM when I was out of bed pacing the floors and watching monitors and lift stations and plant where we at. And then the alarm came into Rod. Rod was on site and Jacob, and called me and informed me that the east was flooding. And at that point, we know that's when it starts losing ground, that's when we put pumps in. And within 15 minutes, I had 4 more guys there. Pumps were installed. Pumps ran approximately 15 minutes, and they were cycling. They didn't have enough to pump. So we were out in plenty of time before we had those issues with it going up in basements. We were on top of it, so pumps stopped cycling, and then we removed the pumps, so.
Thanks for staying up.
Comes with the job.
Other questions or direction? Otherwise, this is what we plan to proceed with.
Could you get me those cost estimates on
I've
like?
asked for it. As soon as I get it, I'll
Walmart,
send
you
them
want-
out. The
Your
residential
paperwork.
versus commercial?
That has the,
Everybody's listed, yeah.
there's 8 pages, but there's some of them that have commercial, industrial that are less than the residential, and then how that would impact some of our big employers. I didn't highlight them, but I know where they were.
Yes, and what I've also asked for is that breakdown between residential and commercial, which he's putting together. It's not quite that simple.
I don't want to keep us here all night, but I am going to say my piece at least. And I'm not in favor of this franchise fee. I think philosophically, it does make sense to have this in place at 0%. Just, at least my 9 years of public budgeting, twice the state has come back after they've set the, once on school board, they'd set the amount per pupil, and once they'd set the rollback here 3 years ago, and came back and changed it a second time on us. And in both of those cases, it would have been nice to have a franchise fee to react in that 90-day window to be able to counteract that when we'd already set a budget. But kind of the argument against that is, once you give any governing body the ability to tax something new, they're going to use it. And I think we've proven that in about 5 minutes. We decided, you know what, we're going to set it at 0 and have this ability to pull this release valve. No, let's go ahead and use it and go to 5%. And now we kind of settled at 3. And So if we just look at that in dollars, this is equivalent to putting, $1.15 with the extra dime that we're going to add on to the levy. So that would be at about 11% tax increase for our citizens. I think we kind of hide that a little bit by putting in a franchise fee instead of on the levy. It doesn't look like it's that big of an increase when you talk about it that way, but when you look at it on the levy, it's a giant increase, biggest one in at least 24 years. So I'm not in favor of that. I am in favor of us starting to put back some money. Obviously have been trying to lead that charge for 5 years to pay things with cash and not get a loan on everything. But this amount, it just doesn't make sense. And I think we need to go back, if we're gonna put a number that we're gonna increase this tax and use that for these capital projects, I think we owe it to our neighbors to go back through the original budget and start with that in mind and see what items that are wants on there that we need to cross off. Even things that I myself want. So if it were up to me, I would go back and try to save every dime we can before we just add this on at the end. I do want to say I appreciate the adding of the verbiage in the resolution to limit the use of the funds. Like Johnny, we ourselves could change that tomorrow if we wanted to. So unfortunately, that doesn't really make it so those funds are really tagged for that project. It is today, but we can change it tomorrow, and so can anybody else. I really don't want to put us in a situation where we go tax all these funds. We put together a couple $1 million to help with this force main, and a future counselor ourselves spends it on some want instead of that need. I know there's not many ways around that, unfortunately. And so I'd like to see us go back and kind of tighten belts on a few other budget items first before we just tax this. And then I'd like to see us go back and actually get into that project and fund it instead of taxing before we have the project, and flip that as we normally do. So that would be my want. Understand you want to go another way, but I'm not in favor of that large of an increase. Appreciate you giving me the time, though.
And are you saying that we should redo the budget in the next week? Because we could do that. If that's what we need to do.
Yeah, I think from a process standpoint, we very much had this conversation at the end. And if we would have done it at the beginning, I think maybe we would have had some different discussion on some of those line items as we went through. If we would have made, from the beginning, a priority to set aside some capital project money, and looked at that under that $10 budget, we might have came to the point where maybe that was 35 cents or 40 cents instead of $1.15, had we kind of taken a sharper pencil to that budget as we went through it line item by line item. Again, I don't want to argue this all night. I've already said my piece. I'm good with that. We can move on, but I'm going to continue to say it.
The franchise fee was supposed to spread it out more evenly though, wasn't it? I mean, not just on the residential, but more throughout everybody that's in the city. I mean, I'm just looking at that, and I understand Andy what you're saying.
The franchise fee, by using that, and Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but it'll hit people that don't pay as much in property taxes. So you're talking the hospital.
It's water and people who use water.
It hits all
Energy.
users,
Utilities.
electric and gas.
Yeah.
It
Excuse
hits
me,
all
electric and
users.
gas. I'm sorry.
Churches, which comes out of our
Everywhere.
dollar anyway, it's gonna hit your hospital more, but they've got the big solar array, so either way, it's gonna hit residents.
Whereas the property tax just hits property owners, the electric and gas, people who consume electric and gas.
It only hits property owners that
Pay
pays
tax.
taxes.
Yep.
So
True.
So this would hit renters, for example. This would hit
Franchise fee,
those that don't pay property taxes.
yeah.
So if we go back to
We
the
don't pay.
budget, like you're suggesting, is there some input on what you think that we should not do?
Well, I think any line item we have on there should be under discussion. Obviously, some items we have in contract that we can't adjust, but if we would go back to that and look at each item as, is this something that we actually have to have? Is this a need or a want? Is this bigger than putting aside money for the force main or a water main or something like that? I just think that's a different discussion. And whether that item be a pool, which we've all talked about 100 times, or something else,
I mean, I guess I don't know in my budget, I don't know, other than that dump truck. I mean, I guess we can keep the old one that we're putting all the money in repairs. I can save the dump truck. We can not open a pool. We can not have a 4th of July. There are things I guess we could all give up and do, but I don't know where that's even going to come close to $6.5 million.
Yeah, and of course, this franchise fee is not gonna pay for that 6.5 million either. Right, we're still gonna have to do something, and I do wish we had the money to just sit there and do it, and that was somehow able to be tagged and collected over a 40-year time frame and put it aside for that.
I'm
That's
just asking as
not the
my
realm.
departments, because I have the most departments, if you guys feel that there's something that I'm doing wrong or I need to cut or do, I want that input to help me out to do the budget you want me to do. Whatever you don't want me doing to save money, I need that input from you people during budget time of what to do. I
But at the
guess.
same time, most of Mike's budget is funded out of enterprise funds and road use tax. So you got to take a look at where it's funded out of. And then if you go back and look at our discussion items, you may have added a couple more items to that discussion list, but in large part, I think we have a pretty lean budget, and there were not many discussion items. Most of our discussion items are typically equipment on an annual basis. Now, the pool is a quality of life issue, and it's been the determination that the pool should remain open, that it will likely have a loss, and how can we bring that loss down and save money? But on average, historically, we were losing $40,000, $50,000, $60,000, and last year was over $100,000. I mean, getting started again, capital projects, the pumps that needed replaced, umbrellas were purchased, chairs were purchased to run those operations. But in
Doing all
general,
right.
I think our tally sheet, when we went through each of those budgets, were
Not a lot.
not a lot on there.
I agree.
And the
There's-
issue on the
there's not a
pool,
ton.
I mean, it's not only if we don't open the pool, we're saving that, but we also have that big issue of that $62,000 for resealing the seams and the painting that we wouldn't have to do either. But if we don't address that problem, when we want to fill it up and we get the water down in there, then we're talking pool floor and everything else. I mean, that's just a maintenance thing that needs done, but,
Michael's,
and like I said, anywhere else in my budget, if there's something that I'm missing or I'm not doing this how you guys want, I need to know.
I have said it multiple times to you too in private, that I think you do a pretty good job on your budgets, and we're obviously not just talking about yours, but Greg, the whole budget is fairly slim. There's not a whole lot of fluff in there. But there was several items in this discussion that we went to, and it went, well, we're still able to do this under the $10 thing, and we're still able to do this and break even on money, and not, we're still able to do this and increase taxes by $1.15. So that, I think, would change this subject as we went through those line items and made decisions on, are these items we want to go ahead and do, are these projects we want to fund, are these events we want to have, all the things. That's a whole different discussion when you start talking, we can do this in $10, or we can do this with a $1.15 tax increase.
right, but it isn't how we talked, and how you present it, but the original discussion item was, is this a year to consider it, given the projects and the expenses that we know are coming up, the issues at the legislature? Is this a year to consider it when you have over an 8% reduction in the backfill and people are not going to notice it as much? There are a number of properties with the equalization order and that had increased assessed values. Even with that, though, that's what that sheet helps to show is exactly what they would be, what that change would be at the 10-cent rate. But the initial discussion point was, is this a good year to consider it? And that was brought up at the very beginning of the budget process. Is it a good year to consider whether or not we do that based on those issues that we know are coming forward? We don't have a specific project that's engineered. But we do know we have a number of stormwater issues. We have a quote for $137,000, I think it is, to fix the regional detention pond over here. So there's an actual project. We know we have a $6.5 million force main project coming forward. So we know we have all of these coming forward. We never know what the legislature is going to do. They've already dinged us with the backfill. They've already dinged us twice by pulling out of their agreement on backfills. And then we had the 8% reduction in this year. So I guess it's in perspective. And then the franchise fee, initial discussion was our ordinance is, we have a franchise, we just simply don't have a franchise fee. If we get it in there, we can address it with 90 days notice if we need to increase our revenue. So it's all about presentation. However, I think the conversation then changed or morphed into a discussion of the capital projects that we all know we have coming forward and trying to limit, or not limit, excuse me, dedicate resources and set those aside for those capital projects that we know we have coming forward. We know we have a $6.5 million sewer project. We know we have water main projects that need to get done in the near future. Otherwise, we're wasting money by having them out for 36 hours straight, fixing 3 water main breaks. If we would have been able to address that ahead of time, that's just money out the door rather than doing a proper repair or reconstruction project. We know we have all of these stormwater issues in key areas around the community that aren't going away. And with these storm events that we have, they're just simply not going away. At the same time, we're trying
Wasn't this well over even your recommendation?
What's that?
Wasn't this even well over your recommendation, or at least what we'd talked about privately of a quarter or?
My original conversation was that we should consider, in the presentation was that we should consider up to a 25% increase in property taxes and institute a franchise fee at a minimum, or at least institute it with a 90-day notice at 0%. But that conversation then morphed into the capital project discussion, which I think is a perfectly valid discussion given the number of projects and the cost of those projects that we have coming forward. And I believe it falls in line with that concept of setting money aside to get those projects done.
I like, and I argue that.
I do.
99% of the time.
Absolutely.
And if some of this were, again, I did not want to spend forever on this tonight, so I will say this, and if we can continue to argue if you want, but.
Not an argument. It's a good discussion.
If I could specifically state that dollar is for that and it cannot change, that is different. If I knew for sure this is $6.5 million and this is how we're going to fund it and I'm going to put that money in that jar and that's exactly where it's going to be spent, that's a different discussion. But the next group or this group can go out and spend it on a Ferris wheel tomorrow or whatever, and we have no control over it.
Do you think they would really spend it on a Ferris wheel, though?
Except
Whatever.
Except you do have to take action to change the resolution,
Right.
which is a public action.
Public action.
And I do appreciate
That the council
that.
has
That's- I've said that to you
Right.
several times this
Right.
week. I appreciate that that's on that resolution.
absolutely,
So at least there
absolutely.
has to
And
be a
like
vote on it.
it's like he's explained too, we're not just talking a force main or 1 or 2 water mains, our infrastructure. I sat up here on this council probably a year and a half ago with a council person that's not here and went on a rant that this council has done nothing in 20 years to address the infrastructure and keep things up. So what I'm hearing tonight is that we're going to sit here again and we're not going to do anything about our infrastructure.
Yeah, I think you're hearing me wrong, though. I don't want to go to that dollar amount. We were talking a quarter or 35 cents, and now all of a sudden we're up to $1.15. I'm using straight numbers. I know we're talking franchise tax versus, but it's equivalent. So that's
No,
my issue.
I guess
is-
all I'm saying is I don't want to be the one up here that you weren't informed of what is wrong with the infrastructure. I want to make sure you guys are all clear. These are not things I'm making up with this force main, and you see the main breaks going on. I'm telling you 5.5 million gallons versus 300 some gallons on an average time with no rainfall. We have serious problems, and to me, only way to fix that is somewhere you need to start sticking some money away. And I've been talking about this force main for several years, and like you say, I have not seen anything on a line item anywhere where we've put 1 red cent away to start this project. And this project was going to blow up, and then we will have some serious problems.
Yeah. I mean, we have tried to start this, correct? I mean, we've tried to hire people to test it, and all of a sudden they couldn't do the tests that we said we were going to do, and so we've had
But
some
these
steps
are all,
in the
these
right
are all the
direction.
tests and the preliminary and the engineer finding out what it's going
Yeah.
to cost, what it's going to take. But even though all that's going on, why didn't we start that jar you're talking about, putting money in? Because it's not going to go away. We don't know what the
Testing
fee is
for
or
a
how much,
There's a
but
problem.
it's here. it's here. So
This is just
I'm just
dropping
asking the
the bucket
council
of what it's
to
gonna
come to
cost.
some kind of agreement some way, because we got to do something.
It's the same thing we do with capital equipment on an annual basis. We transfer money and set aside capital equipment dollars, and a council from year to year can change how those dollars are spent, that we set aside and we transfer at the end of the year into the capital equipment fund. I mean, it's no different. But you're 100% correct. Council can make a change, but legislature has the same issue, legislature to legislature. You simply can't commit future elected officials. You simply can't commit them to what your priorities
I
are.
will move on, like I
Right,
said.
right.
I would be in favor of keeping this on the levy, not the franchise fee, and more in that realm of 25 to 35 cents. That's where I would be.
And I wanted to add one more thing. As I said earlier, there's at least 3 council members that's going to be here for 4 more years if health and everything goes the way it should. And then there's 2 of us that will be here at least 2 more years if the same goes. So it takes more than 3 votes to change this, Andy. So
No,
if,
3
if-
votes.
It takes 3 votes.
it takes 3 votes to change this. So if there's anybody on this council right now that thinks that they're gonna change this within the next 4 years, speak up now, okay? If there's,
Why do you want to know that,
What-
John?
because then at the end of that 4 years, you know, you could change the franchise fee and,
What's
do it
at
for
the end of
nothing.
2 years?
or, well, in 2 years, then one person can, you know, one person can make that difference of the 3 people. That's right.
But it's, just to be clear, with the franchise fee, it can be changed every 90 days, right, with a 90-day notice? Okay. So that,
And following, you have to adopt the resolution, go through the process, yes.
What I'm saying, not the amount, I'm
misunderstood.
saying what it's used for. That's what I'm talking
You're
about.
wanting to talk about the kitty.
the resolution.
Yeah,
Commitment.
I'm not saying that the amount
Spend on
change, I'm
sanitary
talking
and
the
water.
use of, okay? So,
Well, shame on us for the people that are here, that we know all these issues are coming up, and they've been at a low boil for a long time. I have a blue hut on reserve for my house, in case if the rest of you don't want to step forward.
what?
But shame on you, shame on us if we push it off on the next council to raise taxes and to do this and that, when we've known for 2 years that this is going downhill rather quickly.
You've known more than,
More than
you've known more than 2
Well,
years. The
I-
last break was
but-
2, I mean, Randy
I-
Fry has been telling you the same thing too, and no one
I
has
know,
listened.
but it's pretty much very factual, and we have to tread lightly out there in what we do to examine that sewer, because we don't know how much of it is really just super, super paper thin, that if you break through it, we're in big trouble. We need to act now, and I think 25 cents on the tax rate was just a little bit too high. I've calculated what that 3% will do on my utility bill. And being on a single income, Social Security, I can handle that. I mean, it's all of us involved, but the majority of people out in our city are single-family, more than likely female residents, and they're on one income. And I think they can handle this. They may set their thermostat just a little bit lower or a little bit higher depending on the season. But I'd rather do that than, and have a flushy toilet than a blue hut in my yard.
I agree with you, Teresa, because I also think that I can, at this time, would be the time financially to do it. My wife and I have discussed it too, you know, that now because of the taxes and everything, this would be the time to do it. And we got a problem that's coming. I haven't been a council member just for 3 months, but obviously we gotta get ready for it, you know. And I understand, you know, Andy, what you're thinking, and John, the verbiage, I agree with you on the verbiage, but it needs to be done. And some things you have to do, whether you like it or not, but we have to be prepared for it. And prices are not gonna decrease on products in the next few years either. They're gonna be increasing.
And just so the public's aware, we are doing everything we can to offset our cost, whether that grants or other opportunities. We're looking for everything possible. Not that we're going to get them, but we are looking so that we can offset our costs. So,
And thank you for doing that.
well, we need to be doing that, absolutely, 100%.
And like John said, if there's citizens out there that think they can think of something better to do than raise taxes or a franchise fee, I'm all ears.
Yeah, I am too. I'm serious about that. I am serious.
Well, with that in mind, I think we've come to the end of our new business, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And support. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Yeah, they're not cheap.
We typically have a hard time getting it. We tried to get it from Brushtown a number of years ago, and we couldn't even get it there, but typically we have a hard time getting CDBG funding.